Welcome to a series of podcasts from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption. And welcome, hopefully, to the start of your adoption journey. My name's Daniel Fox, and in these episodes, we're exploring the different types of adoption, answering a lot of questions that you have, and hopefully reassuring you just a little bit too. In this final episode, we're going to take you through, step by step, the entire adoption process. Now, it probably feels quite overwhelming at this stage, but don't worry, we're going to break it right down. And the good thing about a podcast is you can just keep coming back to it over and over again, so you haven't got to remember everything first time round. We'll talk to you about who Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption are, how long the process takes, and a lot about training. Here comes my first guest.
Hi, I'm Christine Clipson. I am one of the team managers in the Cambridge and Peterborough Regional Adoption Agency, and I am responsible for the recruitment and assessment part of the adoption agency.
And I asked Christine about Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption.
Okay, so we are Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We cover the whole of Cambridgeshire and the whole of Peterborough in terms of recruiting adopters for the children that both Peterborough and Cambridgeshire have who have a plan of adoption. We go as far out as a 50-mile radius of the centre of Peterborough and the same from the centre of Cambridgeshire.
There we go, simple enough. So let's talk a little bit about the adoption process. This is where it all begins.
Okay, so you would make an inquiry with us, and that can be done via email, over the telephone, or we have an inquiry form on our website. And that would come through to our recruitment officer, who would then get in contact with you. You're likely to have a duty call with them, and that's really just to get a bit more information about you, your circumstances, and to make sure that you meet the eligibility criteria for adopting.
And don't worry, the eligibility criteria for adoption isn't severe. You can find out more about it on the website.
Once that's done, you would have an initial assessment with one of the social workers in the team. And that is a process where they just find out a little bit more about you, talk to you a little bit about the types of children that we have who need adoptive homes, and can make a recommendation about whether or not you're in the right place to begin the formal adoption process. So by that, I would mean that you would need to be able to commit to the length of time it takes to be assessed and to not have any major things happening in your life. For example, if you were due to go on a world cruise or had a significant amount of work being done on your house, we would ask you to wait until that had been completed before we start the formal adoption process with you.
Something you're bound to want to know is how long the adoption process takes.
Okay, so when we start the formal adoption process, the process is done in two stages. So we have stage one of the process, which we would aim to complete within 2 to 3 months. And within that time, we are undertaking quite a few statutory checks on yourselves. So, for example, we would be doing an enhanced DBS check for you. If you've spent any time living overseas, we ask for an overseas check, so a certificate of good conduct for the time that you lived in that country. We have a medical done. That's done by your GP. We also do a check with all the local authorities where you've lived. We take references from at least 3 references. One of those would be a family member and the other would be 2 personal references. We do a home safety check on your property to make sure that the home is safe, and we also do pet assessments. So if you have any animals in the home, we just have a think about what that means in terms of the child. So where the animal sleeps, where the animal has its food, if the animal is likely to be unhappy if the food is moved. Just all aspects of the animal, just thinking about what we can consider in terms of support around introducing a new child into the family where there is an existing pet, for example. During that part of the process, you will also do some training, and you will meet with your social worker at least 3 times. They do an initial meeting with you to explain the work that we'd like you to do in that stage. They would then do a midway meeting with you, and then a final meeting at the end of stage 1, just to make sure that we have everything to be able to move forward into stage 2. The types of things we're asking you to do in stage 1, whilst we're doing all of those checks and references, we ask you to produce chronologies for us, to think about all the areas you've lived, all the addresses that you've lived at, your education, your work experience, and any significant events in your life, any significant losses, anything else that might be significant to you. And alongside that, we ask you to do an experience of children, a list of the things that you've done with other children, and that might be with children in your family, or if you've done any volunteering experiences. And we also ask you to do a learning log. So you'll do a lot of research and reading around adoption, I'm sure, and it's really important for us to know what that looks like, how much knowledge you already have, and how much we need to support you in gaining further knowledge.
So that's stage 1. What next, and how long will that bit take?
We then look at stage 2. Stage 2, we would aim to do over 4 months, and this is probably much more the intense part of the assessment. So you will have a social worker visiting you at home, probably between 6 and 8 times. The sessions can take up to about 2 hours, and we want to talk to you about most of your life. So what your childhood was like, what your adult life is like, what it is throughout your life that has made you the person that you are. We then move on to think about what is your motivation to adopt? Why do you want to adopt? What do you know about adoption, and what can we help you to understand about the children that need adoptive homes? And we also like to think with you about the right type of child for you. So that would be looking at what age child would be right for you, if you had a particular preference for gender, ethnicity, whether or not you are able to support a child who perhaps has some additional needs, whether you're able to support a child really early on in the process, and we have a process called early permanence, and whether you would be able to think about maybe having siblings, having more than one child. Once that has been complete, the social worker will formulate a report about you called your Prospective Adopters Report. So you'll hear people using the word PAR a lot, and that is just the abbreviation for your Prospective Adopters Report. And that report will be shared with you for you to be able to give your views and to obviously correct anything factually that we've got incorrect. And then we will take you along to our adoption panel.
Jade, by the way, is going to talk to us a little bit later about panel.
But I think the thing to say is that we won't take you to panel until we're confident that you will be approved as adopters.
So who are these children who are looking for a home? Well, that's what I asked Tom Hay, Adoption Team Manager.
We work with children across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Most of these children are children in care who've been in care of the local authority. We work for children with a variety of ages, right from newborn babies all the way up to children, 10 years old. We support them right from the early stages. We work alongside the children's allocated social workers within the local authority. We take referrals. We seek to take referrals from our children's teams as early as we can, often pre-birth where possible, certainly very early in the process for those children.
Yes, you heard that right. Some of the children up for adoption today haven't yet been born.
Wherever we can, where that's the plan for the child, we'll look to place those children with adopters right from the day they're born, which is really great. We call this early permanence. You may also have heard this referred to as a concurrent placement or a foster for adopt placement, and it really is a spectrum. But what this means is placing children really as early as possible, and placing them in a lot of cases before they've got an order from the court to say they can be adopted, and sometimes afterwards to, as much as possible avoid any delays for those children.
So how does the matching process work? Well, here's Tom again.
The Family Finder will create a profile of every child that we work with. That will talk about some of their family history, some of their needs, how they're doing now, how they're doing in foster care. We share these profiles on a regular basis with our colleagues in our assessment team within the Regional Adoption Agency. We meet with them regularly to talk about all the children that we are supporting. Those profiles go into a pack that is sent out and can be sent out by your allocated adoption social worker. And once you're in the process, in there you can see all the children that we're currently family finding for. Some of those will be in there anonymously, so we create anonymous profiles for children. Those are usually children that don't yet have an order from the court. But children that we do have a plan for adoption. You'll also see in there children with names and pictures to help with family finding. We also family find for children outside of our agency. We'll use the national database called LinkMaker. So we will put children on there. These are often our children that are more difficult to place. Wherever possible, we'll place children in-house with our internal adopters, but where we're unable to do that, we will seek to put them out nationally to support those children to be adopted anywhere in the country. We've had children placed as far south as Cornwall, as far north as the north of Scotland, so they really can go the length and breadth of the country.
And it's worth remembering that LinkMaker is a reciprocal arrangement. So whilst children around here might end up finding their forever home elsewhere, it also means that your child could come from, well, anywhere in the UK.
And like I said, in most cases, we will try wherever possible to place children in early permanence. We like to try to be as much as possible an early permanence first agency.
I think you know this bit by now, but just in case, early permanence is where children are placed in foster care with a view to that foster place becoming their forever home.
We also try and, we have a lot of children, a lot of sibling groups of children who we support to place. We also have lots of children with additional needs. We do work very hard as an agency to support our colleagues in local authorities to think about adoption as a plan for those children. And we like to think that, almost any child deserves the opportunity to be adopted, and we work very closely with our colleagues to think about whether adoption is the right plan for children, to make sure that's been considered. We would really like to encourage people to consider children with additional needs and children within sibling groups, and being part of the local authority means we can seek support and additional support to help with that.
So let's jump forward a bit now. You've been matched with a child. You then face a process called panel, and I saw some websites online calling it the biggest interview of your life. But fortunately, we've got expert help on our side. This is Jade Cullum, an expert in panel, who's going to talk us through the whole thing. First of all, what it is.
So panel is, it's a group of people. It's a collaborative panel. So it'd probably be easiest if I start with the chairs and then I can talk through who the other members are. So the whole point of panels is that it's verifying the work done by the local authority, but it's also bringing in the voices of people who are involved in adoption other than social workers and the local authority. So we have 4 chairs. One chair is a birth parent who had her child placed for adoption. One is an adopter, and she's in a same-sex relationship and adopted her son. There is another chair who's a social worker, and another chair is from an education background. So they've got a wide range of experiences of adoption, which I think really adds to the richness of panel and the diversity on panel, because often panels can be a bit samey across local authorities, but they're not in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, which is a real positive. So they all bring their own experiences and their own journey into, their own personal journey of adoption to the panel itself. The chairs are independent, so they're not employed by the local authority. So they're very much able to give an independent view and question why things are happening in the way they're happening, which adds to the robustness, really, of why the whole thing's set up in the way it does. So as well as panel chairs, you've got panel members. And again, they're people who have come to panel generally because they've got a real passion and interest in adoption. So some of them are adopters, so they've adopted children. And again, we've got a really wide range. So some people adopted their children 30 years ago. And we've got more recent adopters who adopted 2 years ago, so their children are still very young. And that's a mix of men and women from same-sex relationships, single adopters. So we really have got, again, good diversity, which I think is just so helpful if you're an adopter coming to panel and you can see on your panel there are people who've got the same experiences you've had. We have people who are adopted themselves. We have people who are have had a range of experiences. So we've got foster carers who have a range of experiences with adopted children or moving children onto adoption. We've got social workers from the local authority, and we have independent social workers. Again, people from connected sort of walks of life to adoption. That they're not able to be on panel unless they can contribute. I mean, that's the whole point of it. They've got to bring a richness of their personal or professional experience to be able to then think about how we can, move people through to adopting children. So it's a really diverse and interesting group of people, and it's a really enjoyable process to be part of.
So all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. But how many people are you going to meet on your panel?
So in terms of how panels have to run, adoption regulations are very strict. So we have to, which is why I'm in the post as an agency advisor, to make sure all the bits that need to happen in terms of legislation take place. So it has to be a minimum of 5 people on a panel, and that has to be an independent member, a chair and a social worker. So that's the minimum requirement. So what we do is we generally have 6 for safety's sake in case someone's unwell. It can be that there's 7, but it wouldn't be more than that. And that would be the chair, panel members, and myself. I'm not included in the panel numbers, but I'm on every panel.
I think the big question is, what are the panel actually looking for?
They essentially, panel members, the chair and myself ahead of time, they read all the paperwork, and what they're looking at is the strength of the application. So what they do is they draw out the strengths of an adoption application for an approval. These are the questions we have, and then they set out questions to the adopters that we'll ask on the day in panel. And the whole point of it is to try to give adopters an opportunity to talk about themselves and to be able to give an account of themselves that brings them alive in a way that sometimes paper just can't. Panel is not in any way an adversarial process. It's not Dragon's Den. It's not an unpleasant situation. Everyone in that room believes adoption is a brilliant plan for children, and that adoption is absolutely valuable. What they want to do is give people the opportunity to ask questions and to speak freely. So it's hopefully, and I think the feedback we get from adopters who've been through panel is that it's been a positive experience.
So before we get to panel, we need to have a match. I wondered though, what makes a good match? Well, that was the question I asked Christine.
We are looking for people who are coming into adoption with the commitment to care for a child, not just now, but lifelong, and with the resilience to be able to manage some of the challenges that can come along with just being a parent, not necessarily being a parent of an adopted child, but it is challenging being a parent. It is the best job in the world, but it can also be the hardest. What we know about our children that are coming through is that they will all have experienced some level of trauma, whether that be sadly experiences that they've had at home, or even pre-birth, we know that children who are exposed to drugs and alcohol in the womb are also experiencing a level of trauma, all of which those children need support to recover from that trauma. So we need people who are committed, who are resilient, who are open to learning and are able to advocate for children and able to reach out and access support should that become necessary at any point throughout the lifespan of our children.
And I put that question to Jade as well. What is a good match?
Adoption is a plan for children where we look at matches and think this is brilliant. It's where the needs of the child coincide with the abilities of the adopter. So that's what we're looking for, that if a particular, if children have a particular need, can the adopters that are coming to panel wanting to be their parents, can they meet those needs? And if they can't, what support's the local authority putting in place to make sure they can? So it's just making sure that there's not a disconnect between the ability of an adopter to manage the needs of children.
One of the questions through my interviews for this podcast that kept coming up is there a child for every adopter? And is there an adopter for every child?
Yes, I think there is, because adopters come from huge varieties of backgrounds. So we have adopters from different ethnic backgrounds, different gender identities, different family structures. And that just reflects the diversity across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and the children are equally reflective of the diversity across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. So, and also obviously we're looking, nationally, children are nationally being looked at by Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. So if there wasn't a child within this immediate local area, then you would be looking nationally. But yeah, absolutely. There's children who need a whole range of different types of parenting.
What about training then? Well, there's an awful lot of it on offer. Here's Christine.
So a big part of the adoption process is our training offer. We do prepare to adopt training, and you will start to do that in stage 1, where we have a day helping you to understand the types of children that we have who need adoptive homes. Moving forward into stage 2, we do some more intense training, and we look at what it is that we need from our adopters to help them to support the children, more about the types of children and the experiences they're likely to have had. And then we talk a lot about therapeutic parenting. So we know that children will have experienced trauma, and we know that the way to support children to recover from that trauma is to be parented in a slightly different way to the traditional parenting route, and that is through therapeutic parenting. We do the training on that to help give you the skills and the confidence to manage some of the challenges that we might face. Alongside that, we do early permanence training. So we know that research has showed us that the sooner a child is placed in their permanent home, the better the outcomes for them. We also do sibling training. So that is where we have people who are considering adopting more than one child. We also do existing children training. So that is for adopters who already have a child in the home, whether that be a birth child or an adopted child. And we look a lot at how we would introduce another child into that family, what it means to create a sibling group, and how those children can be supported.
There's still more, by the way.
We do transitions training, so that is specifically around looking at how we move children from their foster placement into their adoptive homes. And lastly, we also have what we call friends and family training. And this is where people in your support network can come along to an evening's training to learn a bit about what you've been through to get to the stage of being an approved adopter, and to think about how they can support you at every stage in that journey, whether that be through assessment or through the introduction period or when the child is placed with you. And that helps people to consider how best to give you support both practically and emotionally, and also how to welcome a child into the wider family network.
Finally then, I wanted to ask Jade just one more question. What one final piece of advice would she give to anyone who's thinking about starting their adoption journey?
I say, ask questions, start the process and start thinking about what's right for you, go in with an open mind. There's huge amounts of support, there's huge amounts of information. One of the things that adoption is assessing an adopter, but it's also giving that adopter the information they need. We don't expect people to have everything in their minds at the beginning of a journey. What we want is that at the end of the journey, we've given them the tools and the resources and the support so that they're then able to parent the children we need them to parent as therapeutically and as positively as they can. We all want the same things, is that for children in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire to have a happy family life. And I think it's, they're not on their own. You'll get support from the local authority. Each step of the way, there's panels there to verify that things have happened as they should have done, because we want the right children to be matched with the right people, and we want people to have the support they need. So there's a lot of positivity. I completely understand that it's daunting for adopters, and particularly at the beginning of a journey, but hopefully as they start it moves along at its own pace, and it doesn't feel disconnected once you're in it, and I think that the outcomes, you make it all worthwhile. The outcome, if you speak to adopters who have post-placement of children have got the family life they dreamed about, and they've got the skills to parent the children in the ways that they need to be parented, then that speaks for itself, really, that it's all that anyone would have wanted for those children.
Jade Cullum wrapping up this podcast on the adoption process. My thanks also to Christine Clipston and Tom Hay for their contributions. And hopefully you're feeling a lot more informed and confident and are now ready to start your adoption journey. Well, don't forget that the team at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption are right by your side, and you can get in touch with them at any time via the website or any of their social media channels. I'm Daniel Fox, and all that's left for me to say is best of luck on your adoption journey.